Greetings, everyone, from the Women at the Top author interview series and our panel interview series, which we are hosting today. Something a little different, wanted to switch it up a little bit. My name is Regina Barr, and I am the founder of the Women at the Top Network, and I'm going to be your host for our panel discussion today, which I'm really looking forward to. I have joining me today Katy Burke and Kathy Longo, who I have known both of these amazing women for quite some time. So I'm really happy to bring both of them together onto our panel program today. I do want to tell you just a little bit about them so that you have a sense of the perspective that they may be coming from. So, Katy is the executive director of Team Women, and she has a successful track record of creating connections that drive consistent revenue opportunities, membership, and I love this positive change in momentum in startup, early stage, for profit, and nonprofit organizations. So, welcome to our call today, Katy. And then Kathy is the founder and president of Flourish Wealth Management, which is an independent boutique wealth management firm here in the Minneapolis area. And Kathy is passionate about helping women and their families connect the emotional and technical side of money. And I do want to give full disclosure that I do work with Kathy in a professional um, formats, her and the team at Flourish Wealth Management, who are amazing. So I like to be transparent with people. So I want to welcome both of you to our call today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Regina.
So I'm excited that we are, depending on where you look on the internet. Some of you know my assistant, Chris Goswiller. We were trying to figure out when Pay Equity Day was. Some say it's in March, some say it's in April. I grew up in the world where historically it has been in April.
Mm.
But it's also Women's History Month, so I'm so happy that we could all be together today. And I want to just give a few statistics because I had to look some of these up. And before we got on our program today, I was sharing that I was doing some of the math on how much time women spend doing their hair, myself included, how much time they spend on childcare duties outside of work and maybe more so than their spouse might, and just different things like that because I was running the numbers. And want to mention women's labor force participation was reported at 57.5% in January of 24. And some of you, if you don't follow these statistics during COVID, that number had actually dropped under 50% for one of the first times that I could remember in a very long time. And there are some almost, I think, about 14 million women owned businesses. And that makes up about 39% of all US businesses. And that's a significant jump from 2019 to 2023. That's a 13.6 increase. So I love seeing that as a small business owner. And then the average revenue of women owned businesses has increased over that same time period by almost 12%. So love also seeing that women businesses are being more successful making money, right? Because we go into
Mhm.
business not just for passion, but also to make a living. And then just in terms of careers for our corporate listeners, women still lag behind men, unfortunately. 10% of Fortune 500 companies have female CEOs, and 10% is an improvement. I've been looking at these numbers probably as far back as 1999 and maybe a little before that. And then in my own Women at the Top study, which I have been looking at since 1999, there's only 7 women CEOs. So we have like a lot of really bright, smart, talented women, and we still are underrepresented in all areas in the corporate realm, but particularly in C-level and executive level. So I just kind of wanted to use that to set the stage so that people have that sort of in their mind as we go into our conversation today. But to get us started, I first want to ask both of you just to talk a little bit about your backgrounds, because I think you both have interesting backgrounds. So, Kathy, I'm going to start with you. And as someone who came up through the ranks in financial services, heavily male dominated, would love to hear your perspective on coming up through a, I think, still very heavily male dominated industry yourself and what you're doing today. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, being a certified financial planner, it is still very much a male dominated world in this financial world that I've operated in. The stats have improved a little bit since I came into the profession about 30 years ago, but there's still only about 24% of women are certified financial planners, which I find that so hard to believe because it's an amazing career. But I do think because the representation is so strongly male oriented, we don't necessarily always see ourselves in there. There's huge initiatives right now about attracting more women into the profession. So I'm hoping that we'll see some jumps as we go forward. But I remember in my career just being the only woman at the table or really working hard to have to overbuild my knowledge and my expertise to have a place there, to get that opportunity to do much more relationship navigation so that I had that opportunity, because that was really the only way that I was, able to get the opportunities of seeking out those one-on-one relationships. But I think where I really found the way to, connect with other women is by, seeking them out in the profession. So I'm a part of this one study group that they named it before I joined, but I think it's an amazing name called the Goddesses of Financial Planning, and I've been
That's
a part of
awesome.
that group. It's all women business owners, financial planners, and we've been around for about 25 plus years. So finding other women in the profession has been a great opportunity to connect, and then I've also used that opportunity as I started my own firm 11 years ago now this spring to seek out other women business owners because I think some of the stats you shared about women business owners, it can be hard to find each other. And I'm a part of an organization called Women Presidents Organization, which is all women from different types of businesses. Uh, there's a stat that I learned there that it's right about 2% of women owned businesses earn over 1 million in revenue. So there are a lot more opportunity. That stat is pretty small, but I'm encouraged that as we talk about the numbers that we can change the trajectory because when people hear the stats, they think, huh, how can that be? We've got some work to do here.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize it was that small, but that doesn't surprise me, and, I love that you're part of an organization called Goddesses. I can't go wrong with an
I know.
organization like that. It's catchy and stays in your mind, so thanks for sharing that. So, Katie, how about you? Have you had any similar experiences in the course of your career?
For sure. And first, thanks, Regina, for having both of us on. I've worked in a few traditionally male dominated industries like TV production and in manufacturing, and even as the only woman on a lake association board. So I've definitely been in leadership spaces where most of the decision makers were men. But honestly, I don't necessarily feel that it was a barrier. If anything, it just fueled me to figure out how to break it down. And you've talked, Kathy, about the surrounding yourself with people that lift you up. And so that's been a key focus of mine. Early in my career, I had to figure out how to assert my voice, which is still a skill I work on every day. I mean, it's just, it does, these skills we always have to work on. Definitely build credibility, which takes time. So I had to do that early in my career and then hold my own in rooms where I sometimes was the only woman. And truth be told, most of the time early in my career and even bouts now, I don't feel confident, right? But I show up anyway. I raise my hand, I take on new challenges and prove my value. So that's been sort of a mantra that I've lived by. My dad used to call me his tough marshmallow, and he was my biggest cheerleader. And we need those fans in our corner as we navigate life and our careers. But all of those experiences and more, like you said, Kathy, I've expanded my network not only with the network that I lead, which is Team Women, but to be in circles with other women supporting women, like the Minneapolis St. Paul Business Journal Women in Leadership Circle. I'm a member of that. I'm a member of Minnesota Women's Economic Roundtable. So I'm surrounding myself with women leaders and being in safe spaces where we can feel vulnerable and ask each other questions, and seek resources to help us navigate those difficulties that come up in life or sharing the successes, that's fun too. But all of those experiences are why I'm a big part. I'm so passionate about creating spaces for women not just to have a seat at the table, but to feel empowered to own it. I'm passionate about that. I want to be a catalyst to help women get the skills, the mentorship, and the network to break through their barriers, and personal or professional, no matter the industry that they're in, because we all know right here, when women are supported, they don't just succeed, they thrive.
Mhm. And I love that both of you have mentioned organizations that you're involved with that help to not only lift you up and empower you, but other women. Because I think sometimes women think that we have to do it all alone, or they think just because I can do it, I should do it. And that's, I think, a big learning for most women there. So thank you for sharing that. I love it. So I recently wrote an article for LinkedIn called Aiming for the Top Job. Watch out for these three roadblocks to your career. And in the article, I talked about a couple of things that I have seen over the course of my career, whether it's as a executive coach or a trainer. And more recently, it's interesting, I'm seeing this in real estate. I think both of you know I've become a realtor. And so I've been having some deja vus about things. And my assistant Chris and I have talked about this, especially around negotiation, which is a different topic. But what I have typically seen when women are either in the corporate realm or they're in a business is that what precludes them potentially from being successful is how they manage life balance, business acumen, and P&L, whether that's in their business or in the corporate realm. And when I was in corporate, I sought out P&L experience because I knew that was the ticket to my success. So, Katie, I'm going to start with you. What are you seeing as some of the barriers for women in business?
Well, first, I thought your article was spot on because it does really highlight those barriers that have kept women from reaching that corner office. Definitely, those are the three biggies. But what I'm seeing now, especially post COVID, is a shift in what success actually looks like for many women. I mean, more and more, like your career path, Regina, is a great portfolio blend of different career, different things, and you go for everything. That's why I love watching you succeed and lead. And more women are choosing careers that fuel their passion and align with their purpose rather than just chasing that traditional corporate ladder. In fact, at Team Women, we have about 650 members, and nearly 40% are at that director level on up to the C suite. 30% are managers or individual contributors, 30% are entrepreneurs. And every year we do a membership survey. And before and during COVID, the top industries that our members reported as working in were healthcare and financial services. But over the past 2 years, consulting has taken the lead. And so, what that's showing us is more women are stepping into the fractional and boutique consulting roles that may still be in healthcare or financial services, but they're creating businesses that give them more control over their time, value, and compensation. And so they're building their own corner offices, right? And
Yes. And I
for
love
those,
that because I think
for
that's the wave of the future if women want to truly
yeah,
be successful and do things in their own way.
and for those that are still in that corporate role, though, I do see some common themes like of things that the barriers that are perceived barriers, like clarity and direction. What is my next move and how do I get there? Strategic networking is huge, not just meeting people, but building influence and who's the right person to meet. And then taking initiative, just raising their hand for the opportunities, instead of waiting to be tapped.
Yes, and that
So,
that could be a whole conversation maybe another
mm,
time, Katie, because that's something that literally drives me nuts sometimes that women
mm,
don't raise their hand when they are more than qualified.
qualified.
So,
Yeah.
yes. So, Kathy, I want to shift the conversation over to you. And I wanna talk a little bit about how does that translate financially in terms of building wealth or being ready for retirement? Because you and I had both served on a board, called Money Weave, and, this is just can't talk today. The statistics of the number of women who retire in poverty are just appalling. So, how does some of that translate in a financial sense?
Well, when you speak of the gender pay gap, that's one of those, but there's other factors that we need to think about for women. So living longer, taking time out of the workforce, caring for kids or for parents, or not having that flexibility that we can do it all. Like we talk about, maybe where entrepreneurialism may give us more flexibility. But I also think that that piece about understanding the P&L equates also to the personal side too, that we're not given the skill set, and it's kind of across the board, but, we're not women are not given that skill set of learning what it takes to manage their personal finances. It's not taught in schools. We're seeing a shift, like Minnesota actually has put some new curriculum in place, and we're seeing other states, but we still have a long way to go. Our parents don't necessarily teach us, so how do we get that confidence in taking charge of our personal resources and understanding the role that they'll play longer term. So you think about back to that the pay gap, that all impacts our social security, our 401k match, our ability to put money aside for future savings. So we're jeopardizing our financial futures because of that pay gap and everything else that comes along with it. And then we think about too, there's one other factor is the chance of being single at some point in our lives is really strong. We are living longer, so we likely will outsurvive our spouses, and in the case of divorce too. So we really have to think about, like, how do we take control of our financial planning to be able to better control our future on that side. And so again, advocating for that, the pay increases and all of the focus that we can put on our personal finances to make our resources work the best for us for the future. I'll add one other little point in there that women are actually better investors than men. There's studies that have shown that. And I can't remember, if it's like a 0.5% better per year. And they broke it down into some of the reasons why, but one is like women are more patient in their investing strategy, which you do have to be patient to let the markets work for you. So there's a lot of opportunities for women when it comes to taking control of their financial future.
Well, I'm just chuckling to myself because Kathy does know my husband, and we are polar opposites when it comes to money. I'm a saver, he's a spender. Um, I tend to look at the long view. He will be checking things every day. Um, but you make some great points. I just wanted to share because the first thing for women out of college, they actually start at an equal pay. And then it's very quickly over time with that first promotion, they fall behind. But I wanted to point out we have made some progress. And again, I'm generalizing women in general because if you slice and dice it by different ethnicities, it's a very different picture. But in 1979, when they started looking at pay equity, women only made 62% of what men made. We are now, as of 2023, at 83.6%. Again, the general average, not dissecting it. So we've made progress, but we still have a ways to go. And for people in especially minorities, that gap is even bigger. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Which leads me to my next question. I want to talk a little bit about mentoring because I think mentoring is critical for women. And I've always had this philosophy of have a mentor, be a mentor, or self mentor. And I think have a mentor is great if you can find one, but I also have found that being a mentor, I've learned a ton. When I'm mentoring, I feel like sometimes I learn more than what I'm giving. And then self-mentoring is what are you doing? Are you a member of an organization like Team Women or have you surrounded yourself with women? Are you reading? Are you studying, going to seminars? I'm an avid reader, so I read a wide variety of books. So I would love for you, if you could, to tell us about a mentoring situation that helped you in your career and what was your one takeaway? Because otherwise we'll be here all day probably, because probably a lot of takeaways. So, Katie, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay, so I am also a big believer in mentoring. I mean, even your podcast should be on that list, Regina, for
Thank
resources.
you.
Yeah, 100%. Not just for I believe in mentoring not just for career growth, but also for life. I mean, and I've been lucky to have several mentors, both men and women, who've helped me really learn about myself, affirm my decisions, navigate tricky situations, and figure out where to put my energy. Right. So, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was trust the process. I learned that early on, and that became my lifeline when I was rebuilding my life and career after my divorce. Because as you know, my ex husband and I had a manufacturing business together that we sold, and at the time that happened, I had 0 confidence. Like you talked about, Kathy, divorce is, it's a tragedy, and I was in an extreme state of uncertainty with 2 little kids, and so I felt like I was starting from scratch. So trusting the process was key to a key learning, for me. And my first opportunity after this a period of time was to work as a business consultant, helping other women start and grow their business, and for another nonprofit in town. And we were a micro lender, so I could actually help them fund their business too, which was thrilling. And honestly, that experience changed everything. It gave me purpose. It helped me move forward. It got me out of myself. And it just was so rewarding helping. Like you said, Regina, you get back so much more than you give in roles like that. That was just a changing my mindset for me to learn. So
That's great. I love, what you said about trust the process because sometimes the process is messy, but when you have hindsight and you look back, it's messy in a good way. So I do love that. So Kathy, how about you?
Well, I think about a mentoring experience that came via WPO, the Women Presidents Organization, and a point that you made, Katie, which was about being in groups where you can be vulnerable and ask questions. That's exactly what happened to me. So I was a partner in another firm and really just started to think about a different future, but I didn't have that confidence in me. And so a group of women heard like I had my update in the meeting and they said, we want to have like a special one-on-one brainstorming with you, and I think there were like 4 of us, and they just really challenged me and encouraged me that I could take this leap and helped me believe in myself, and that's really one of the key pieces of me starting Flourish. And then I think, like, Regina, you talk about, like, it's the mentoring you get, it's the mentoring you give. So I remember early when I started Flourish, I was on a podcast talking about my experience of starting the firm, and I had several people reach out to me and, like, and then just wanting to do the same thing for themselves, but didn't know if they, had the courage and if they could do it. And one woman in particular, I ran into her a couple years later, and from that conversation, she said, "I started my own business. It was like conversation I had with you, believing that I could do it." And so I think there's just so much of just those conversations. Sometimes there are longer term experiences with people, and sometimes it's just that one conversation that makes a difference. So I really think it's important to find those opportunities to be open to mentoring. The self part too, like I'm involved with, strategic coaching where I go quarterly to coaching because I think there's, like, so much, like, in my self growth too. So it's from all different angles where I see those opportunities too.
Well, and I love that, both of you have mentioned about giving back, and I think that's what's so critical, especially for women, is that they need to see other women that we're doing it and we're figuring out how to do it, and, before we got on the podcast, sometimes it means I didn't curl my hair today because, I wanted to focus that energy and time on something else that was of importance to me. So, put my hair up, and you know what? Nobody fell over, nobody ran screaming. It's just, so we figure it out and we're willing to share. And I wanted to mention that both of you are doing things that are sharing information. You're doing tons of things through Team Women, and Kathy, you doing a podcast. And one of the reasons I started doing this podcast was I knew because I was getting so many inquiries, both from small business owners and corporate women, that I couldn't possibly get with all of those people. That could be a full-time job, right? Just,
yeah.
and so I started to do the podcast because I wanted to elevate the voices of women. Now, it doesn't mean that on occasion I don't have a man on the podcast, and I think I've had 2, maybe 3 over the course of the years because it was a topic that I felt was important. But I want to have women be able to see other women doing the things they want to do. And I also want to elevate women authors and others who are doing great things in their space because I learned early on that women didn't have a voice. This is back in the days of newspapers. I would read the newspaper and I'd open it up and I would see men quoted all day long as I would be reading the paper, and I was like, "Well, where are all the women?" Because I knew a lot of great women. I was like, "This is crazy." So, even things like this, we can help, show other women that you can do it and showcasing our stories. So, I wanna shift back to we've kind of been alluding to this equal pay day being observed this year. I think it's April 8th is that it's observed, and again, you could go out there and find 8,000,000 different dates, but traditional date is April 8th, and what that shows is how far into the year a woman has to work before that they can make the same amount of money that a man made the previous year, and I have found over the course of my work, especially as an executive coach, that there are some skills that I think women really need to hone if they want to alter or mitigate that pay gap, if you will. And one of those is negotiation. And I find that I'm constantly working with women inside my business, outside of my business, in the coaching business, in the real estate business, trying to really help women hone that skill. And actually, I feel like from the work I started doing 20 years ago around this work, moving into real estate, that I'm having deja vus around that and having a lot more conversations on negotiation. So what I would like to know is what skill set, and I know you may have both of you may have alluded this a little bit in what we just talked about. What are you seeing? So Kathy, I'm going to start with you. What have you seen when working with clients? If you had to hone in on a skill set that you wish, especially your female clients, would have.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things that, like, even when it comes to negotiation is getting the knowledge, doing the research, and building the confidence, and that seems to be a better spot, because I'll talk to women before or they're getting a job offer and, they're wanting to, like, how do I approach it? Can I really ask for more? But if they can come with the knowledge and the data, then they have a position that they feel more confident to go forward with. So, same thing like when we're working with the financial empowerment, we're giving them the education and the confidence. And sometimes it's sorting through the motions too, because what is really holding us back? Maybe there's an emotional piece there, like we don't feel like we're worth it, or that we might have to like challenge our previous thoughts and reframe to come up with some new way of thinking about how we move forward.
I'm
Mhm.
glad you brought that, emotional piece because I do think we all have different money stories, and very often there's an emotional connection, and many of you have heard me talk about my mom. I mean, I grew up poor and, a lot of my story around money goes back towards that time, which is why probably why I'm a big saver and, I would rather save up my money before I buy something like think about remember the days of layaway where my husband's like, "Oh my gosh, he gets a bonus, and I one time I joked around, and he kept telling me all the ways he was gonna spend this bonus, and I'm thinking to myself, "You only got 1 bonus," and so finally, because I was trying to have a little sense of humor, he was changing his clothes, and I picked up his pants, and I shook his pants out, and I was looking, he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm looking for that hole in your pocket," because I said, "You've told me since you've been home, you've told me 5 ways you're gonna spend that bonus," and I just was getting a little worried, so sometimes I have to have a little humor with that because we all have different stories. So, Katie, from your perspective, um, when you think about skill sets and things, how's that impacted the women in businesses that you're working with?
Definitely, I definitely think negotiation is one of the most critical skills that women need, and also strategic networking. They kinda go hand in hand, but I'll talk more on negotiation, because, women do historically have that hesitation, that belief, that confidence that they are deserving of it. And so you do need back to community, back to team women, back to, you need a safe space to talk through your goals, your worth, and yes, your compensation. And one of the things I forgot to mention in our last question is that we have an amazing mentor program too. And we launch 2 cohorts a year. And so that would be a perfect opportunity for those that are seeking to have a trusted advisor on this life journey, that you could join us on a mentor program journey. So, but I love that we're in this kind of liberating time right now. You mentioned all the stats, Regina, which I'm so aware of, that women are only at 83% of our cents on the dollar. And there's still, a ways to go, but yet at the same time, I feel like like you, positive on the movements that have been that women are making, and also the transparency that's going on. There's
Mhm.
so many women's groups out there now, and there's so many money conversations. I mean, what Kathy speaks about is so important. Just women understanding their finances, and both of you talked about the importance of understanding P&Ls and corporate roles. I mean, I'm a big believer in that. Just always knowing where every dollar goes, and sometimes you're better at that in your business life than you are personally, I find too. But back to we definitely are in a liberating time where it's okay to talk more openly about money and women to share, what their comp is, and be vulnerable, ask for help. And then also to understand your values too, because for some, salary isn't the priority right now. For others, it's flexibility, benefits, overall lifestyles. It's really about knowing what matters to you. So do your homework, look at market comparables, know your worth, and most importantly, believe in that value that you bring. Because here's the thing, when women don't negotiate, it doesn't just impact them individually, it does impact businesses too. And companies that don't close that pay gap are losing top talent, like we talked about earlier, because women are either leaving to start their own businesses or moving to companies that do recognize their worth. And for those who stay, the financial impact is huge because women who don't negotiate can be leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table over the course of their careers. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that have made moves. There's been a lot of job movement in the last couple of years. And and it really gets down to, why are they moving? Well, it's because this role doesn't align with their values anymore, and they're willing to leave stock on the table too.
Mhm.
So they're willing to walk away from equity roles. They're willing to do it to get in roles that suit their lifestyle now. So if they're not comfortable negotiating, start small, get comfortable advocating for yourself, even in everyday situations, because the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I'm sure you see it a ton, Regina, in your real
Yes.
estate too.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
Absolutely. Well, all great advice, and I do love that we are living in a more transparent world, especially when it comes to money because, back in the day, salaries were a big, dark secret, you couldn't talk about them, and so many of the laws now are es in certain industries, in certain states, that they are requiring that you disclose salaries, and so that is really, what do they say? Light is the best disinfectant, right? So, there is so much more data that's available, that wasn't previously. So we are actually winding down on time. It goes so fast, we could probably talk for hours. If you could only give our viewers or listeners one piece of advice that you want them to remember from our conversation today, what would that be? And Katie, I'll start with you.
okay, life can be bumpy. My life has been. Don't go it alone. You don't have to. In a community with like-minded women or men, whatever you choose, but be in that community, because women who support you, and cheer you on really just leads to innovation and growth. I mean, just empowered women really drive positive change. So,
I love that. Don't go it alone. And Kathy, how about you?
Own your financial future
hmm
and don't be afraid to demand what you deserve.
oh, good one.
Love
hmm
it. What a
Love it.
great way to end our conversation. Don't go it alone. Own your financial future and don't be afraid to ask for what you're worth. So that's all we have time for today, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us, Katie and Kathy. And a big thank you to our viewers and listeners for joining us today. See you next time.